let's get on the jet. So we get on the jet, and I was pointing out something to him. I said, you know, that thing has come down 656 miles northwest. It's in an area 120 miles north of Las Vegas. It's called Groom Lake. It's a dry lake bed. And I said, how are you going to land this jet? You boys notice this thing's got rubber tires. It's going to bellow, you know, it's going to moor up to its belly out there. I said, don't worry about it, kids. So we get on the jet. An hour and 45 minutes later, when I get there, you know, they were right. You know, there's dual 10,000-foot runways there. And there's a 42,000-acre Air Force base there. It's not on my little map. So, this is a place what you all today call Area 51. But the date is June 20th, 1971. So we land. And there's my rocket south at the end of the runway, down trash dump area. I thought that was a good place for it. So anyway, it parachutes were bellowing in the wind, and it looked just fine. So I start to walk toward the rocket. Well, don't make it. These big Air Force guys, these funny-looking little beret hats, look like Pierre. Wherever Pierre is at. So they throw me in this golf cart, and we go for a ride. There are three big, weird-looking, low-built hangars, but they're extremely large and deep. We go in the middle one, and I'm sitting in this golf cart and going, this is neat, you know. You guys want to show me a hangar? That's nice. I like this hangar, you know. Well, anyway, lights started spinning inside, you know, little warning lights, and these rails come up out of the floor around the doorways, and this thing inside is big, y'all. It's about 4 football fields. Big. The whole thing drops out from under it. It's an elevator. So we go down about 20 stories, and the thing I noticed most interesting about it is worm screws. You know what those are? Worm screws is the thing that turns your lipstick in your lipstick. You turn that thing, the lipstick comes out. If you take it apart, you'll find a little thing that looks like a screw in there, and that's how you make things go up and down. It's called a worm screw. That's what makes your lipstick work. However, this is a little bit bigger than a lipstick case. These worm screws about the size of a quarter of this room over here, each of them. About 12 of them running up and down the walls, and it's the best thing we know of to lift extremely heavy loads. Because it's better than any chains, cables, wires could ever achieve. So these things are going down, these big worm screws, and we get down and the floor levels out, and now we're down at this big, huge hangar type thing underground. I'm going, wow, this is neat. You know, I thought I knew some stuff about the Air Force then. You know, I was real buff on that, and I don't recall them having an underground hangar anywhere. So anyhow, it's a big arc type roof. It's all concreted in place. It has a corrugated type surfaces. And all the workshops and offices and buildings are built flush in the walls, so they leave the big center bays open. So we drive down through this thing, and there were some neat planes in there. There was some experimental planes I recognized. There was, at that time, it was 1971, and I remember they just had a thing called an SR-71, a Blackbird. So there was a Blackbird sitting there. And there was a couple other aircraft even today I didn't recognize. They looked like a teardrop. I have no idea what those things were. So anyhow, we ride in the golf carts. We're going down until we get to a big work bay area, and there's big side doors, and they open the doors, and we go in this work bay area. And there's a neat-looking thing sitting in there, and it's big. It's about the size of a school bus, and it's under these covers, and they pull these covers back, and I'm going, holy smokes, it's an electromagnetic fusion containment engine. Now, mine is about the size of a football. This thing's about the size of a school bus. And I was kind of disappointed. I thought I was kind of ahead of everybody. And I'm going, holy smokes. Now, Apollo 14 was about to leave the Cape at that time. So what are we using as Cape? Liquid fuel rocket engines. So I asked them, if you guys got this, you know, why are we using liquid fuel rocket engines? These fusion containment engines are much better. And they're going, well, we're just working on this engine, son, and that's why we brought you down here. We need some help with this thing. Since you seem to have a small one that's built just like it, and it just landed up here, and it works really well, this one's all busted up, and we'd like for you to tell us some things about it. And I'm going, well, if it's your engine, you know, why am I telling you about it? And they go, well, see, we have people working on it, but they're not here right now. And I'm going, I went, you know, are they on vacation? They go, yeah. Oh, I'm 17-year-old, you know, so, and then he said, yeah, and since you seem to be really good at this type of technology, we'd like for you to give us a hand with it. You'd like to help your country, wouldn't you, son? I said, yes, sir, you know. I listen to Nita Bryant, you know. So I said, I need to crawl up on this thing, get a good look at it. And so I walked over toward the engine. I was saying to myself, these are no good lying, no good to you, because I knew that there's something wrong about this story. So we get near the engine. The way the room was lit was really interesting. You ever seen a paint booth when you paint a car? You ever looked at the lights? The lights are built in a rainbow fashion the whole length of the area. That's so you don't have any shadows. Because if you spray and you get a run, you got a shadow, you might not see it, and you mess up your whole car in a paint job. This entire room is lit the same way. There's no shadows anywhere. You hold out your hand right now, you'll see shadows. The reason they do that, that's a great idea for a lab, because that way you can work on something without, moving lights around to see what you're working on. So that caught my eye. I thought, wow, this is a really neat room the way they have it lit. So when I get near the engine and I get ready to, get on the engine, as I put my hands right next to the engine, there's shadows. And I'm going, there's no shadow on the floor, there's a shadow on this engine. How is that working? I thought, wow. So I didn't think much about it until I put my hands on the engine. Now, some of the alloys in this engine was really interesting. There were some areas in the outer panels that are almost translucent. And when you touch them, you can see all this neat little waves coming off your skin and moving through the alloy. And I pull it off and it stops, I put it back on, and I'm like, wow, that's neat. Heat recognition alloy. I knew that we might get that one day, but I didn't think it worked that good. So anyhow, I'll crawl up on this thing, I'll take a look at it, and what has happened as I get on top of it and walk toward the center, there's a big hole there. And what has happened, this thing has suffered a core breach. Now, the core breach in these engines was a little bit of a severe situation. The internal combustion heat of the engines, of these type of engines, run around 100 million degrees centigrade. You can toast your marshmallow there, y'all. So anyway, when the field dropped and this blast center was, all the alloys exposed to this heat, it vaporized, so it's blowing out in a 360-degree pattern. But there's a fail-safe system the way we have it built, because when these things converge, the manifold will shut down in nanoseconds, billionths of a second, so the blast stops. So it just burned out about a 4-foot diameter section and stopped. So I thought, wow, the fail-safe systems work. So anyway, by the time I looked at all this thing, and there was another thing interesting about it. You know what that would be? No wiring. Now, why would that be interesting? My engine had about 2 miles of wiring on it to get all the necessary data and stuff flowed to the twin particle accelerators. If you ever seen old pictures of Fat Boy, the atomic bomb, remember the thousands of wires hanging on that thing? If you owned a soccer ball in 1945, you would have been locked up and buried under a federal prison forever. You know why? A soccer ball would have been top secret. Because the soccer ball is the design of Fat Boy. The way the geometric patterns are shaped, that's where you put all these wires, which fires these explosives in a 360-degree pattern, crashing everything into each other to split an atom. Okay? So, this thing had no wires. And I'm going, wow, this thing's got no circuitry. How is this thing working? So there's these thousands of tubes running all over the engine, cascading, and there's a big stem running through the center with all these others raining out over it. And I went, I've seen this pattern before. And I went, I know what it is. It's like a brain stem. It's like a brain stem with all this cascading piping all over this engine. That's the circuitry. Yeah, I don't know. I guess they didn't figure it out at the time. But anyway, while I was looking at it, I thought, boy, this is a fascinating, interesting design. Well, it was about that time when I just had to turn around, and they're standing down there, and I'm looking at them. I'm going, you know something, y'all? This thing ain't from around here, is it, boys? And I said, and let's do some assumptions. This is an engine. It came out of a craft. Where's the craft? And if it's got a craft, it's probably a crew. God knows what you got to do with them boys. Well, they got real hostile about that. They don't like questions like that. And I said, furthermore, I'm not going to help you anymore because you guys lying. This thing is something else. And we're not even on a technology base at this level. This is 1971. Well, the two guys that carry me around a lot, my escorts, they're climbing up, and they don't look friendly. So I said, all right, I'll get down. So I am really ticked off. So I get down, and when I do, I put my hands back on the engine, And then some of the panels, instead of the nice little swirling effect, they now look like tornadoes radiating out through the metal. And I go like that, and go like that, and I went. So I get off the engine, now we're riding back up to the surface, and I started thinking about that, and I just realized what that was about. That thing is a symbiotic engine. You understand what a symbiotic engine is? For those who don't, let me enlighten you. A symbiotic engine is an engine that can merge with a different type of external force or entity. What the pilots would do in a craft like that, when they sit down in it, they strap on a hat or whatever they do with a suit, bolt into the seat, and the pilot and the engines merge together in a symbiotic relationship. Remember all the tubing going down across the engine? It's like a brainwave pattern. The mind of the pilot becomes a firing order of that engine. Now you might sit there and go, he's crazy. Yeah, that's just BS. Oh yeah? Well, let me enlighten you to a current event. Right now in Princeton, in New Jersey, Princeton University, there is a lab that Dr. John runs, and McDonnell Douglas, you ever heard of them? Not a little slop outfit. They are funding a project where they are building a symbiotic system for firing controls on the F-22 fighter. You didn't know about that, huh? Oh, well, let me tell you more. They're doing an opposite system. What do you mean by that? It means that they're trying to shield the pilot's thinking away from the firing controls of the jet. Now, why would they want to do that? No, not remote control. The pilot went home last night, opened the door, finds his wife in bed with a basketball team, couple of dogs, whatever else. No. The point is, the pilot's having a bad day. He gets up next morning, he's got to go fly this fighter. So he straps into the F-22, and he goes into a flight. He engaged with an enemy craft. They get into a radar lock contest, and now he's having a bad day from what he's thinking about. And the sensitivity of the firing controls of these systems are so sensitive, they can pick up his frustration, and they hesitate. At 1,600 miles an hour in a dogfight with SAM-locking missiles, one hesitation, just that, will determine whether you live or die. So the enemy locks on him, and they kill him with the missile. So they're building a system that will screen his thought patterns away from that firing control system. Where do you think they got that idea from? Duh, 1971. They had a whole nifty system. So I knew right then that this thing was something from somewhere else. So anyhow, a lot of things happen in this story, and we don't have time for it, but I got out of there thanks to Curtis LeMay, and if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have made it. Well, Curtis came over there because it's a long story, but I blew my own engine up when I got to it. They took me upstairs. I asked to see my engine. I knew what was going on. They wanted first strike capability. What's going on in June 1971? We just bombed the dickens out of Cambodia. Why? They're not even at war with us. We're locked in North and South Vietnam War. And the Soviets are stockpiling into Cambodia, feeding the North supply, and Westmoreland, General Westmoreland, getting his butt kicked daily on the battlefield. So Westmoreland has requested for small trash can-sized nuclear, what we call strategic nuclear strike, which is what we call surgical nuclear strike, small little nuclear warheads. And Soviets said, you do that, and we will launch global-wide thermal nuclear war. And let me tell you, at that time, the Soviets were not kidding. Well, the guys on our side aren't any lighter in thinking. They're just as serious. So the reason we don't annihilate each other at that time was we live under MAD, perfect name, M-A-D. You ever heard of it? Mutual Assured Destruction. All right? How do you win MAD? First strike. The first strike is whoever gets there first wins. So guess what they wanted? My rocket engine. Put nuclear warheads on it, put it on our subs, park it off Siberia. The Soviets would not even see the blip on the radar screen. All they see is a white flash, and that's the end of it. We win. And when you do, you win the world. Whoever wins MAD controls the planet. So they're ready to go for first strike. And I couldn't let them do that. So I did my rocket in. So how could you blow up a rocket when you're just a 7-year-old kid on a top-secret military base? You start crying. Simplicity gets them all, buddy. I start crying. I want to see my rocket. You guys going to take it away from me? I'll never get to see it. At least want to see it recovered from the flight. So they said, God, put him on a golf cart and go out there and look at the rocket. So we went out there. But as we went, I bent down to the big hangar doors and the wheels, and these wheels have this black stuff on them called graphite grease. So I just scooped my hand across it real quick, and they throw me in there, and I got some on my palm. So we ride way out there to the rocket, and I said, let me take a close look at it. So the two guards are standing there. So I open up the inspection doors, and I open up the cyclotron particle accelerator chamber and smear the grease inside, and then close the doors. I turn on the accelerators. Ask any physicist what happens when deuterium meets graphite grease. Extremely violent interaction. So in 60 seconds, the particle accelerators are going to cycle up and fire their charge into that grease. So I close the door and I go, hey, this thing's got a leak. We got to run for it. So we get on the golf cart, and the sergeant's going, what's going on? I said, I don't know, drive, So we are going, and this thing, and they drive, we're about a quarter mile away, and he goes, is that far enough? I said, I don't think so. So these guards are just going, and we just hitting high spots, man. And I'm going, I hope this thing gets out far enough. So anyway, it detonates, and it blows a hole about the size of a football field, and Pistolin is gone forever. So that's my engine. So I can't... I didn't have time to finish the research on that thing, y'all, but let me tell you, what I just got rid of in 1971 was amazing because, see, this engine's really built for space, deep space launching. See, it's a very simple principle that works in physics. For every action, there's an opposite equal reaction. Well, the matter coming out of the nozzle is moving at 186,756.54 miles per second. You ever heard of that? Speed of light. If that's true, then the ship will eventually overtake and equal the speed of the exiting matter. So guess what this engine's capable of? Light speed. And we had it in 71, and I had to blow it in a million pieces. It's a bad day. So anyway, they didn't like that too much. So now the engine's blown up, and the one downstairs is busted, and all they got left is this kid. So if they throw me in this room with no windows, I sit on a concrete floor, and they told me I will be there for the rest of my natural life. And they're not kidding. And now I really start crying. Because my parents think I'm in White Sands, New Mexico. Well, anyway, there's this big commotion. I was there about 8 hours, 10 hours, something like that. And door opens up, and there's this silhouette standing in the doorway, and he's cussing to no end, and there's this stogie going like this. That man, if you know anything about him, is called Curtis LeMay. He showed up from Wright-Patterson. If you didn't know the way things are structured at that time, Curtis LeMay was involved with Wright-Patterson since he was a former SAC commander. SAC at that time was in charge of what you call Groom Lake Area 51. So he just showed up and he took me home. So anyway, he gets me home and he told me the best thing I could do is never build another rocket engine for the rest of my life. And that's the best he could do for me. And he'll try to take care of most of the paper trail, but he's not going to get it all, and he didn't. So anyhow, they take me home, and he takes me all the way back to my house in Melbourne, Ohio, and there's my parents. And that's how I ended my summer vacation of my junior year in high school. So I start school in the fall, and first thing teacher asks is, write about your summer vacation. I told him I worked at Pizza Hut. So anyway, everything was quiet through the winter and the spring, and I was graduating, and now I'm going to go to Ohio State University to astrophysics, and I'm all ready to go, and I'm shaking hands, and I'm talking to the parents. Yes, I know, great, can't wait to get there. Oh yes, I'll say hi to Woody Hayes when I get there. So anyhow, turn around, got hold of his hand, and it's a DOD agent from Groom Lake smiling. And he slapped this paper in my hand. I open it up, and it says, greetings. It's June 10th, 1972. The draft didn't shut down until 1975. I am pulled out of the line, taken to a car, parents screaming back there, and 3.5 hours later, I come out of Fort Columbus, and I end up in a place called Langley, Virginia, home of CIA. So, first taste sodium pentothal, great party stuff. So anyway, after about 4 days of partying with these boys, they didn't get what they wanted, and so they were going to send me to the Fort Bragg. I'd go to the DMZ in Vietnam, come back, and they said, you won't be there long. That's the good news. Bad news might be in a box. Good news, we'll put a flag on it. So end of problem. So I'm not going to give them what they want. So before I left, they asked, what do you feel about jet engines? I said, well, they can be defensive. I can work on those. Okay, you go in the Navy. All right, so I'm in the Navy. 14 weeks later, after Great Lakes, I'm in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm standing there, and I'm now working on a thing called the F-14 Tomcat. So when I'm 19 years old, I helped build the power plant of the F-14. And I'm in the Navy for the next 10 years. After I get out, open my own private aerospace consulting firm, and here I am today. And that's pretty much that whole story. And I would have gladly left that buried, and I would have taken it to the grave with me, and I would have been happy not to tell a soul about any of this, because, see, think of the problem. Sure, yeah, I saw an alien engine, in a top-secret Air Force base called Area 51. Yeah, and I built an engine similar to it. Yeah, so much for a 3D career. Gone, right? I'm not going to tell you squat about it. So I was quiet for 27 and a half years. And then this guy comes up one day, and he tells me, call this man. And he said, there's a lot of people like you that seen these things. I said, yeah. Okay, so you heard the story by a friend of mine. So I called this guy, his name is Dr. Steve Greer. You ever heard of him? Well, I talked to Steve Greer, and Steve started talking to me. I told him the story, and he said, you want to test, you got to testify to Congress about this. I said, I'm not sure about this, Steve. I said, he said, no, you got to testify. So for 2 months he called me, and then 4 days before the thing for the testifying, I said, I'll do it. And he sent me a plane ticket, and on April 9th, Wednesday of this year, I testified to a closed session of Congress in Washington, D.C. at the Sheraton Hotel. Now, we had some interesting times there in this hearing. First of all, Steve had us all set up, and we would get to where we could talk to the joint session. Sure enough, there was an awful lot of people there. And the deal was when we testified, we got into the particulars and the details of what we were talking about. And Steve was really had things pretty well organized. And so as we got into the hearing process, there was 13 of us, I think 12 or 13, and everybody that was there had seen, blips on radars and chased them, and had radar contact locked with a pursuit aircraft, and there was a lot of sightings and stuff. And I know to a lot of people that may sound disappointing. That don't sound very exciting. Well, I got news for you. In the 3D world, we get pretty damn excited about, UFOs locked on radar. That's a contact. So this was pretty significant, because you got to understand, a lot of these people in Congress hadn't heard about this stuff. Now, some of the old guys have. I guarantee you they have. But for a lot of them, it was new. The only problem I was having, though, I was the only one that was hardware contact at the time. And Steve has about 120-some witnesses that not only seen stuff I've seen, but way beyond things I ever saw. I just really saw an engine, that's all I saw. I've never seen a UFO in my entire life. I've never seen an alien, no autopsies, okay, or any of that stuff. I'm not a UFO researcher, never have been, never will be, okay, like 7 Up, never have, never will. So don't think I'm out here to do UFO research. I'm not. I'm a space transfer consultant, and that's where I'm at. That's what I do for a living. However, I didn't work at Area 51. I had a one-day experience, all right? So don't come up and tell me, say, oh, he's worked there for 25 years, right? Wrong answer. So it's just one thing. I would have left it alone, and I would have been happy to do so. However, when I show up and I'm the only person there that's got the hardware contact, suddenly I know what a turkey feels like on Thanksgiving. So I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. So we got them testifying. I'm thinking about, man, how am I going to tell these people this? So I'm sitting there going, I sure hope I need something more tangible, other than just sightings and stuff. I need somebody to at least give me something that could corroborate my story a little bit better. So I was expecting, 120 hardware witnesses, and what I saw would have been puny compared to what they said they'd seen. So right before I got to testify, there's a guy that got in front of me. He's an attorney from Asheville, and he said in 1961, he was 18 years old. He was put in the basement of the Pentagon. He was an encryption officer, where they do secret coding, decoding. So one day his supervisor walked in. They laid down 3 pieces of metal. One of them was about a foot long, and the foot long piece has all these really strange looking hieroglyphic type things written on it. And I'll hear that and I go, oh yeah. So I didn't tell you something about that big engine. It's covered with all these weird looking markings. All right? I was born in photographic memory. I've memorized this entire engine from end to end. So when I hear that, I start writing stuff down. I'll reach up and I hand him the paper and go, hey, Steve, does it look like anything like those? And he remembered what 12 of the emblems looked like, and I hit all 12. Now, this guy's an attorney. He's under oath. Now, you got to remember, we're all under oath. 20 years federal prison for perjury. Now, how many people in here are willing to take this risk? And they will do a paper check run on you, guaranteed. And they'll assign a little committee to follow you. Well, as any good attorney under oath would do, he looked at that and he goes, I swear I never met this man before in my life. And I went, good, that's exactly what I want. Because it's true. So when I get up and I go, well, guys, how did I hit all these emblems on that piece of metal? It's simple. That piece of metal came off the engine. I was standing on top of it, and I was in the bottom of the Area 51 that you said don't exist. And that's how, so anyhow, everybody's going. So, how could I do that? The mathematical odds are ridiculous. So now they had a real problem to struggle with. And about 75% of the people in that room are attorneys. No attorney under oath is going to risk losing his bar license in the 30-year practice. Now, is it? So they're going to have to believe him. If they believe him, they just saw what I did. Now they got to believe me, but they can't believe me because it's too much to believe. So they got a problem. However, they handled it pretty well, and then next day we're supposed to talk to the press. Well, everybody talks to the press except Steve kind of gets me off the side, and I never get to talk to the international press about this. So I'm kind of sequestered. All right, that set off a whole hoopla of stuff, which you probably heard in the grapevines out there. And what happened was I wrote Steve, it annoyed me a little bit that I didn't get to talk to the press, and I thought, hey, it's probably just as well if I go home. But I started thinking about it, I thought, gee, I want to ask him how come I didn't get to talk. So, because he never did talk to me or even answer my, we never got a chance to talk. So I make 2 phone calls on his answer machine, write him a letter, and never hear from him. And that kind of annoyed me a little bit. So when I get to San Diego at a whole life thing, I just do some real negative talking here on Steve Greer. And only because it's more reactionary, okay? And I'm kind of assumptions on my part, but I'm a little bit upset about it. So one guy jumps up out of the audience. His name is Les Morgenstern. Anybody ever heard of him? Well, anyway, Les Morgenstern, pretty good friend of Steve Greer. So he comes up at me afterwards. He's really upset. So you shouldn't be so negative with Steve Greer. I said, well, what would you do? I've left 2 messages on the machine. I wrote him a letter and he's never answered me. So I suggest that if you know him, give him a call me quickly. So, but I said, you know what, Les, you're right. I won't say another negative thing. So when I get home 2 days later, Steve Greer calls. So I talked to Steve, and Steve was been out of the country, which he travels an awful lot and does a lot of international traveling, so I didn't have a problem with that. And I asked him about the letters and the 1 letter and 2 phone calls, and he said he didn't get them. And I believe that by the way I could listen to him. And believe me, I get boxes of mail, and I could lose mine in the shuffle, so I'm sure he is really swamped. So I said, well, let's get on into Steve. I said, how come I didn't get to talk? And it was his strategy. He didn't tell me, so he told me his strategy, and I'm listening to it. And I said, that makes perfect sense. You should have told me that in the beginning. So that was an error on his part. The error on my part was I kind of got a little upset about it. So I said, we need to talk about this. So I said, you want me to say nothing. I can't do that. I said, I've done stepped out on a limb. People are asking questions. And I can't do it for 2 reasons. One is, if I don't say anything, it's going to make you look bad as a covert person, and it's going to perpetuate a even further gap in trust here. And the second thing, we really need to disclose this because of what the whole thing was about to begin with, was it not? So we worked out a deal. We had to hammer out things. I could talk about a lot of this. There's certain key points he didn't want me to say, and I agree with him on it. And that's pretty much how we left it. And he has another hearing coming up, and I'll be involved in that. What's the point of all of this? The point is this. I really hardly know Steve Greer. So I called up Les Morgenstern, and I said, Les got on the phone. I said, I'd like to thank you, Les. You're absolutely right. I should not have got upset and started saying negative things because I hadn't got hold of the original source, and we didn't hammer things out. And you were totally right, and I appreciate you pointing my error out. Well, it's quiet on the phone. Les comes back and goes, oh, my God, a scholar and a gentleman. I didn't think there was anybody left on the planet like that. And I went, what? Something said I was wrong, okay? So he said, boy, that's pretty neat. And I said, well, I appreciate your help. So that's the point I'm trying to get across to you here. As a scientific observer of a situation, why is it in the UFO community you have such infighting and backstabbing among yourselves? I don't even know Steve Greer that well. I do know he's a doctor. He's an ER doctor. And but I do have 14 medical doctors in my family. So I know what I'm dealing with, okay? They do. There's an ego problem there a little bit, only because they do remarkable things. They literally bring the dead back to life in an ER room. So you have to learn to appreciate that about them. So people say Steve Greer is really egotistical. No, he's not. He's very highly educated. He's very capable, and that's just a natural thing that occurs with him, so I agree. But the point is this. I hardly know about him. Here's the guy that's in space sciences. There's a medical doctor, and we had a real touchy ego with everything from flashing egos or whatever. We talked it out. We worked through it. We came to a compromise, and now we're back on track, and everything's fine. If two people hardly know each other can do that, what is your problem that you attack your own friends and you're at each other's throats out there because the data don't match? So I would suggest to you that you shouldn't do that, and it needs to stop for a very good reason. If you want to break through that federal wall over there and you shine a flashlight on it, that's the way y'all are now. If you're splintered among yourself. When you become cohesive, you become a laser beam, you'll burn a hole right through it. And that's what you need to do.